Well, that was a rubbish Grand Prix, wasn't it? What's going on, Frank, David, Walther, Outlaw? What a palaver. Who knew? Sometimes you got to take off your hat, right? I didn't know what was going on. This is bonkers. Eat some humble pie, Cameron, because that was an absolutely incredible Las Vegas Grand Prix. Everything that we want out of a Grand Prix that makes for stakes and excitement, that indulges us even to suspend our disbelief. It was all there. It was a brilliant Grand Prix, and I've got to eat some humble pie. Amjad, what's going on, Polish? Man, driver of the day. We'll get to all that, Amjad, I promise. But there's some bits and bobs that we need to review first. I don't want this to be another Max Verstappen loving, but I've got to talk to this fella, man, because in real time, as this race unfolds, I'm like, there's no way this dude can win. Obviously, he gets it done into turn one, which was astounding in and of itself, let's be honest. So short is the run-in to turn one at Las Vegas. Nobody had him doing that. But yet again, Max Verstappen makes mugs of all of those people who obey and abide by the normal rules of physics. Gets it done up the inside of Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc isn't happy about it, says that he's been aggressively overcrowded. And again, after the incident post-race, Max Verstappen said that he just didn't have temperature in his tyres. There was a bit of understeer there, which makes you think potentially that his 5-second penalty that he was given by the FIA, by the stewards, was potentially a bit light, because ultimately that 5-second penalty was of no consequence. And you see that borne out by Max Verstappen's message over the radio. Send them my regards, he says. We're in front anyway, send them my regards, which is almost like 2 fingers up to the stewards. Why are you even giving me this penalty? Because it's not of any consequence. But what else at this stage, peddlers, would you expect from the FIA, if not for incompetent, inconsistent stewarding? They need to have a look at that, but I don't want to make this about the FIA. I want to make this about the drivers, because that was a sick race and we saw some very, very sick driving. There is a point during the race when I'm on to Baxty back and forth, legend of the shakedown, like, Baxty, this feels inevitable. It felt inevitable at the start, and Max Verstappen proved me right, but then circumstances kind of fallen against him, right, with the timing of the safety car, and his teammate Checo Perez all of a sudden finds himself in pole position to win this Grand Prix, having fallen foul of an incident in turn one. Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz. There was a massive melee. Checo Perez does the right thing and does as he does very frequently. Like, sometimes he calls the Joker. Sometimes he plays the Joker and takes a cheeky early pit stop, does that, and the safety car, the timing of the safety car works really, really well for him. So Checo Perez finds himself in second place to Charles Leclerc and in pole position for a race victory all of a sudden. I was texting Baxty, I was like, is this still not Max Verstappen's race to win? I'm looking at it, I'm feeling like it's inevitable. Baxter responds, he's like, no, Checo's absolutely in pole position to win this Grand Prix. And Baxter was right at the time, absolutely right on the time. And then you get the safety car again, and Checo Perez pulls another Joker and gets another discounted pit stop. Checo Perez is going to win this race, of course he is. But he's got to battle back and forth with Charles Leclerc. Can he pull the move on Charles Leclerc and make it stick is the question. Because if he can, then of course this is Checo Perez's race to win. Of course, and we've talked about Checo Perez over the past couple of races. There seems to be a change in this dude's mood and this dude's attitude. The Mexican Minister of Defense, I've said it a gazillion times, he's no slouch, he's no mug. The recency bias mafia will say that he's not good enough, and that's not true. Class is permanent, form is temporary. And so in this dude's change in attitude, he's a bit more match fit. He's spending more time in the sim. We've seen an upturn in this dude's form. And that was only to be expected because he's a bloody good driver. He's Checo Perez. And that's what we're seeing here. But ultimately, He needed to get it done and make it stick on Charles Leclerc. And he needed to do it quick time because there was a charging Max Verstappen behind him. And you look at it again in real time. I don't want to do the recency bias and the Monday morning quarterback thing, because it's all well and good to say after the fact, well, Max was always going to win. But in real time, again, for the avoidance of doubt and not to labour the point, in real time, I'm having the conversation with my guy Baxty, legend of the Shakedown podcast. I'm like, this is inevitable for Max. He's going to work his way through the field in no time, and then he's going to nail Checo, and then he's going to nail Charles. And as I'm saying, I'm like, bloody no, he's only got 20 laps to do all this. Thinking, you know what? This is a tough ask. But then you fast forward a couple of laps, and he's nailed the mid-pack. He's nailed George Russell. Again, there was a bit of a controversial incident there. And then he nails Checo, and then he nails... Like, he goes through them like a knife through butter. And again, this dude, I don't want this to be a Max Verstappen loving each and every single week. There are other topics and other narratives and other plot lines that we have to give some credit and speak to. But each and every single time, this bloody fella just does these things that... He just makes these things look easy. And they're difficult things. Vegas isn't an easy track to pass around. Okay, so you got the DRS, you can optimize for that. But he just comes through the pack and he wins with time in hand each and every single time. Important piece of that narrative to pull out. Checo Perez, and they said it in the comms on the internationally syndicated Sky F1 broadcast, that Checo Perez was struggling around these turns. Remember, peddlers, okay, so Red Bull, the RB19, is absolutely a rocket ship. It is. But around a track like this, where the straights are long and the braking zones are very, very stoppy, that favours the car that is the Scuderia Ferrari. It doesn't favour Red Bull. Their car excels around medium to high speed turns, of which there are not many at Las Vegas. And so Checo Perez realises this and alters ever so slightly his setup as versus his teammate Max Verstappen. He puts more rear wing on to help him around these turns. Max Verstappen, though, not having any of it. Which again just speaks to this dude's ability to manage for a difficult handling dynamic in real time, to manage for tyres in cool attempts, and to manage the graining situation. Just got this innate feel that not too many other drivers in all of history have had. And you see that again, it's borne out by the way that he rockets past Checo Perez on the straight in the overtake. Not just because he's a better driver than Checo, but because his setup is different. It's more favourable, and he can do that because he has this god tier innate feel, and now he's adding to that race management and racecraft and 200 IQ. Like, he's just got all these other things, these weapons in his artillery that makes a really, really difficult... That the cards didn't land for Mr. Verstappen this race. He shouldn't have been able to win that, not with time in hand. He shouldn't... Okay, so he's in the best car, but was it the best car really at Las Vegas? I'd argue if you're talking to me, if you're going to give me one of those cars and ask me to race in my life, I'd take the Ferrari each and every single day. At Las Vegas, that Las Vegas track suited that Ferrari more than it did Max Verstappen's RB19. And again, the dude just... I don't understand. Polish, thank you so much, man. Hit the like on your way. I appreciate you joining. I know that for some of you guys, it's super late. It's super early in the morning over here in London, England. But I'll go another 20, 30 minutes. But I just don't... I'm baffled, chaps. I just don't want it. It can't be the Max Verstappen loving it each and every single time. But the true test, the litmus test of this dude's capability, if in real time, it's all very well and good to be a Monday morning quarterback and say, well, after the fact, Max Verstappen was always going to win that race. Best car, best team, best strategist, best aero chap. It's all very well and good to say that in retrospect. But in real time, I'm testing it. I'm going back and forth with people who know infinitely more about the sport than I do. We all concluded that this was Checo Perez's race to lose. It was. He was in pole position. The cards had fell very nicely for him around the timing of the safety car, him taking a cheeky free pit stop, being on the Apex Predator 2-stopper strategy, and still Matt's just makes a mug of everyone. Go on, and let's talk about the incidents. Charles Leclerc, you know what? I thought the move on Charles Leclerc was very, very aggressive in the overcrowding, hanging him out to dry like Michael Schumacher used to so famously. I thought it was aggressive. I thought it was borderline. But it depends on what rule set you're looking at, doesn't it? This is where it gets techie. By the old rules, if you're going like 2000 to 2010, it was probably maybe a bit too aggressive. You could aggressively hang someone out to dry, but maybe a bit too aggressive. Maybe it did warrant a penalty. But the reason why it doesn't get a sterner penalty than the 5 seconds is because the rules and the guidelines are so bloody flaky, aren't they? Let me read them out to you. I've taken them. Overtaking a car on the inside of the corner. Here are the guidelines, by the way. Not rules and regs that you need to, these aren't the technical rules that you need to stick very stringently to. These are guidelines and the stewards can interpret them right here. Let me read them out. In order for a car being overtaken, so this is overtaken on the inside of the corner, so applicable for Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, turn 1, lap 1. In order for a car being overtaken to be required to give sufficient room to an overtaking car, the overtaking car needs to have a significant portion of the car alongside the car being overtaken, and the overtaking maneuver must be done in a safe and controlled manner while enabling the car to clearly remain within the limits of the track. So there's 2 pointers there, right, to pick up. The first being under control. I'm not sure Max can argue that he was under control. I think he admitted after the race even, didn't he? He said after the race that he experienced a bit of understeer even, in which case the penalty is true and fair. Probably you could argue a bit lenient to the 5 seconds. And then the second portion of that, while enabling the car to clearly remain within the limits of the track. I'm not sure Max Verstappen did that right. He's overcrowded Charles Leclerc to the point where he has to leave. You can make the argument that 5 seconds is a tad lenient then, just based upon what I've just read. But you know what? Max Verstappen doesn't give a fuck. He's an overtaking. I remember some like Senna. There was a time when Senna came under massive criticism for being too aggressive, for being too strong and too robust and too resilient in the way that he used to race each and every single one of his competitors. There are parallels that run through Senna's career, Schumacher's career, and now Max Verstappen's. I'll put Lewis in there as well. Early Lewis Hamilton, 2007 Lewis Hamilton. So much flack and criticism for just being too aggressive a racer. And we can diatribe and go deep on the racing thing. And obviously, listen, to overtake cleanly, you're going to need a dance partner in the guy that's defending, or girl. So it's a techie one, this. But one thing I will say, and again, I will play this forward into the next championship, 2024 and beyond. If you're gonna race Max Verstappen, if you harbour ambitions of beating Max Verstappen over the course of a 23-24 race season, the line of least resistance is to out-qualify that dude and get off down the road. You don't want to engage this dude in an on-track battle, because I'm not sure too many times. I can't remember too many people who have come out on the positive end of that circumstance in recent times. That's just the God's honest truth. Check the stats. I just think you're going to have a hard time. He races really, really hard. Okay, so he's borderline. Brake test Jeddah, turn 4, lap 44, Brazil 2020. Like, he races hard. Like he has one gear. And he's going to always be criticised for that. But you know what? As a die-hard racer myself, I don't hate it. Chaps, I'll be honest. I absolutely don't hate it. Robin, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to Charles Leclerc's manoeuvre. Because he got driver of the day, didn't he, Charles Leclerc? Let me give Charles Leclerc some praise before I give him some criticism, because there's lots to say about Charles Leclerc. I think, for the avoidance of doubt, that Charles Leclerc is a God-tier driver. Not without his foibles. Now, does he have the ability to think his way through a Grand Prix in the way that a Lewis can, or a Max can, or a Fernando Alonso can? Not just yet. And that's his soft strategic underbelly, right? If you're going to get at Charles Leclerc, then that's how you do. There is a clear blueprint, and even if you're Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, I think he has weaknesses on track in that he's liable to make a cheeky mistake, a la France last season, a la Las Vegas this season. What's interesting about Charles Leclerc's race is that he did you guys can see it on YouTube, there was a virtual Grand Prix that Charles Leclerc did with the likes of Jamie Chadwick, Ash Van der Leyen, Young Philly, Dirk, my guy, and he made the same mistake in that race. Virtual Grand Prix, it's turn 12, made exactly the same, or very, very similar an error in the lead up to turn 12 and handed the lead to Jamie Chadwick. Check the stats. So Charles Leclerc, I was saying that to say that Charles Leclerc has a cheeky mistake in him, and usually his mistakes are of consequence, right? In stark contrast to Max Verstappen, who also will make them. None of these guys bat 1,000. Each and every single one of these drivers will make a mistake at some point in the career. But what I'm calling into question is the frequency of Charles Leclerc's mistakes and the extent of them. They are of consequence usually. I mean, I suppose you can't argue that he lost the race, but under different circumstances, that lockup into turn 12 could have cost him the race, right? Max Verstappen doesn't make these mistakes, but I digress. We're talking about Charles Leclerc at the moment. Charlie Leclerc, incredible drive. And you know what I enjoyed from Charles Leclerc? Martin Brundle made a statement about Fernando Alonso that sometimes his driving style, it looks like he's driving with a knife between his teeth. You can just see him hustling the car along each and every single time. And I feel like so angry in the car with Charles Leclerc after the turn 1 lap 1 incident with Max Verstappen that you could leverage the same analogy. He was fuming. And you can see the way that he fought with Checo Perez and even the way that he fought with Max Verstappen after that lap 1 turn 1 incident. But you could argue, peddlers, and this is what I'm going to argue about Charles Leclerc and all the other drivers not named Max Verstappen, you could argue that there is a way to defend Max Verstappen into that turn 1 lap 1 incident. Do not give that dude the inside. If Max Verstappen gets up your inside, manages to get a whiff of putting a wheel up your inside, the move's done. It is too late to defend it there. And I wanted to see Charles Leclerc. So short is that run-in to turn 1, lap 1, and Max Verstappen starting on the dirty side of the grid. What I wanted to see from Charles Leclerc, square up your car, point your car at Max Verstappen. You can't afford to give up the inside into turn 1. Surely, if you have hopes and aspirations of winning a Grand Prix with Max Verstappen also on the front row, then your modus operandi has to be to defend turn 1, lap 1. You've got to end lap 1 in front, surely, if you are Charles Leclerc. Now, he spoke to this. He really badly wanted to win this race, and you can see, listen, he was keying with Max Verstappen after the race, and they were in the car playing buddies, and yeah, everything was hunky-dory after the fact, right? Which I think is also something that Charles Leclerc needs to absorb some criticism for. Let me dissect this one bit at a time. That move from Max Verstappen is super brave, but listen, if Charles Leclerc is as elite a driver and as god tier a talent as we all think and hope he can be at some point in the future with his potential and his absolute one-lap speed, his levels, isn't he, Charles, the Monegasque? But if he's that guy, he's got to defend better, more astutely into turn 1 of lap 1, because you can make or break a race on the first lap into turn 1. Murray used to say that you can't win a race on lap 1, but you can lose one. And you could argue that Charles Leclerc, in not keeping the first position, turn 1, lap 1, could potentially have lost that race there. And then you've got to defend aggressively. Lewis used to do it. Michael Schumacher used to do it. Off the line, turn 1, lap 1, you have to defend that more aggressively, Charles Leclerc. You've got to defend it aggressively because it could be the making or the breaking your race. And ultimately, you could argue on a different day that Charles Leclerc adjust my camera here. It's all going on chaotic here, guys and girls. Very professional camera. You could argue on a different day, sans safety car, that Charles Leclerc lost the race in turn 1, lap 1. He's got to defend that more aggressively there. But for that, an absolutely incredible drive. And the move late on Checo Perez, that gives me, it fills me with two emotions. The first, me rooting for Checo Perez, not even to just finish second. I kind of wanted Checo Perez to win that race, I'll be honest with you. I harboured hopes that the prediction of an upturn in Checo Perez's fortunes on the back of him being ostensibly more serious about his racing, spending more time in the sim, being more serious about his health and well-being, and turning up to the Grand Prix looking very match fit from a distance. I hope Checo Perez was going to win this race, I'll be honest with you. And especially on the back of the final stage battle with Fernando El Plan Alonso at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. I just hope, I didn't want for Checo Perez to be on the losing end, the downside of another battle in the latter stages of a Grand Prix. I would be honest, I was rooting for Checo Perez. So when you see Charles Leclerc lock up, it's like, all right, then it's Checo Perez's to lose again, right? The second place at the very least, okay. So Max Verstappen is on a completely different plane from the Mexican Minister of Defense. But you just hope, you harbour a hope, however slim, that he can hold off Charles Leclerc for second. And again, you know, the move from Charles was like Danny Rick-esque, super late on the brakes, and he's got to make that happen there and then, right? Because they're on the last lap, and that's potentially one of the last places that he's going to pull off the move. Increíble from Charles Leclerc. And again, he's got that in his locker. He's a brilliant racing driver, and he can make things happen like that. But you've got to place, for me, I've got to place, just like Charles Leclerc lap 1, turn 1, I've got to place more emphasis on what Checo Perez, the Mexican Minister of Defense, didn't do into turn 2. Like, he's got to defend that more. You know what I'm reminded of? I'm reminded of Abu Dhabi 21 and Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen on that last lap, when Max Verstappen just takes Lewis by surprise. Okay, so it's an astounding move, right? But the owner surely, on the last lap of the last race in one of the greatest championships that we've ever seen, that there has to be a responsibility on the defender to at least make the overtakers, the attackers' move difficult in that circumstance. Lewis Hamilton didn't do it in 2021, okay, so there was mitigating circumstances and other controversies included in that we need to talk to. Charles Leclerc didn't do it turn 1, lap 1 with Max Verstappen as the attacker. And Checo Perez didn't do it in the closing stages of that race with Charles Leclerc on rushing. And I think that's a critique that's worthy of mention. Absolutely worthy of mention. And it pains me. And especially with Checo Perez, you can criticise this dude in the overtake. You can say all you want that he's not the strongest attacker, and it's probably a worthy criticism. But as far as defending and defensive awareness, we saw it in the battle with Alonso. But again, he makes a critical mistake at the critical time, and I think that's a shame. I think that's a shame for Checo Perez. He will take the vice champion title. He will finish second, and again, this is the first time that Red Bull will be finishing first and second in the Drivers' Championship. I think that's worthy of note, but I just think it's a shame if Checo Perez wants to get over that ledge, get over that hump completely, then he's got to stop making mistakes at the critical times. As he adjusts his camera again. All professional air peddlers, I hope you enjoyed it though, man. Let me look at some of your comments quickly before I move on to my next point. Kang says, Max versus George. Oh my gosh, yeah, I missed it out, didn't I? Max and George. It's techie. So as Max is coming through the field and he's got his blinkers on and he smells blood, he can sniff top step of the podium again. There's a techie overtake on George Russell, but again, you view this under the lens and within the frame that Max is coming through regardless. If he's got a quicker car and it's towards the end of the race and making this move and sticking it is going to depend or lead to him winning a race, he's coming through regardless. peddlers, and this is why I say it's going to be so difficult to beat that dude in eco machinery or less going forward. It's a bit dodgy though. It's interesting since and after the fact, George has come out and said, you know what, it was my fault. I didn't see him. And I think that's, I don't know. I think that's emblematic of something deeper with Max and his colleagues, his rivals. I think they fear Max Verstappen, all of them. Charles Leclerc included in that. Charles Leclerc was fuming in the car at the time, right? If that was Michael Schumacher, post-race, we're going to have words, just like you did David Coulthard at Spa, right? You hindered it. You could have ruined my race here. That was a dangerous manoeuvre. A Michael Schumacher would have said, or I don't know, or Mika Hakkinen would have said. But Charles Leclerc comes out the car and they're in the bloody Phantom and they're keeking, and Max Verstappen gives the explain, and all is right within the world. They almost, I don't want to label, I don't think Max is a bully, but he's very forthright and abrupt and straight down the line to the point. He says it as he sees it each and every single time. And these guys almost like cower in his presence, don't they? They're just like, rather than I've never seen Charles Leclerc. I know that he wants to, but Charles Leclerc's so nice as a person and so meek and mild as an F1 driver that he almost cowers and retreats in himself when confronted by Max. Here's my explanation, mate. I understood. What I would have liked to see from Charles is a bit of teeth. You know, like how Max confronted George when they had their incident at Baku. Well, listen, keep the same energy. You're a DICK head, mate. Like, I don't, again, you don't want to encourage people calling other people names. That's not where we're going with that. But show some teeth, because Max Verstappen is that type of driver who will run over you. And he has been running over. He's got all of these drivers under manners at the moment. Like, I just think he just looks at them and he's just like, yeah, they're fair game. Oh, that's Charles Leclerc going into turn one. He's going to give me space. And they need to readdress all of the other 19 guys on the grid need to somehow, some way, readdress their dynamic with Max Verstappen, because he's that type of driver to establish patterns of behaviour and use that to his advantage, leverage that to another 5, 6, 7 championships in outer years. Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris included in this, Lewis even, Alonso, all of these guys, particularly the younger ones who are going to be racing Max Verstappen for many, many years to come, need to readdress this balance in this dynamic. Because, listen, again, ultimately, to make a manoeuvre stick, you need a cooperative, collaborative, equal and opposite dance partner. And Max Verstappen is making it very clear that, listen, if we're going back and forth, if we're racing for all the marbles here, then one of us is going to cede, and it's not going to be me, says Max Verstappen. But a brilliant manoeuvre by Charles Leclerc in the closing stage of the race. But yet again, I will place the onus more on, as fantastic as it was, and it's super brave, massive, last of the late breakers, Harry Flatters per the inimitable Martin Brundle. It was an incredible move, but I wish that Checo didn't even need to move, and this is per Jenson Button just now in his post-race analysis. Checo didn't need to do a hard move to the left. It wasn't a full send of a manoeuvre, right? You just needed to do a subtle jink to the left, sufficient to discourage Charles Leclerc from even making the move. Doing that move just says, listen, mate, I've seen you, don't even try it. But because he's done the absolute geometric racing line ones and tried to widen and straight line the turn, he's kind of left the door open, as did Lewis Hamilton in 2021 Abu Dhabi. But I digress. Martina Max is a hard racer. There's no kidding there. No kidding. Lewis has to be on 110% to beat. But we're going to talk about that in the next couple of streams, I'm telling you, because it's going to become pertinent. A wise man once said, the other 19 drivers will need equal to or better than machinery. Look at this. What's going on here? My camera is on chaos, peddlers. Excuse me. It's all chaos. A wise man once said that in order to beat Max Verstappen from 2024 therein, you will need stuff. You will need good fortune. you will need a better car than Max Verstappen. You will need a team behind you with God tier strategy. You will need a team that doesn't make any mistakes in pit stops. These are the requisites necessary to beat Max Verstappen over a 23-24 race season, because he's just, especially in that Adrian Newey car next year, when they're claiming that they're going to improve. But I think you're onto something. No, it says, I think if rivals at similar pace, they would defend harder. But no, this is the issue, mate. I agree with you if you're talking about Spa or Zandvoort, where Red Bull kind of just had the beating of the rest of them. But at Las Vegas, okay, so Charles Leclerc was on much older rubber towards the end of that race. But nevertheless, this is for the race victory, right? This is 25 points. So you've got to, I don't think Charles was beaten by strategy and a bit of bad fortune. One stopper wasn't the quickest way from lights to flag at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. That much we can all agree on. However, turn one, lap one, you've got to defend that harder if you're Charles Leclerc. If, indeed, as he did, harbour aspirations of winning that race, it's a critical time. I remember Pep Guardiola as a coach, like a cheeky footballing analogy from time to time. Pep Guardiola as a coach always used to say, listen, I don't need for you to play 100% each of the 90 minutes of a football match, but I need you to do 2 or 3 things that might change the game. That there, Charles Leclerc defending Max Verstappen into turn 1 of lap 1 is one of those things, right? Make the difference, because you're Charles Leclerc ultimately. What you mean to say you can't? He has racecraft sufficient to defend Max there, so I don't know. Defending it when he started to defend it is too late. The opportunity's gone. Max Verstappen already has the inside line, and by then, peddlers, we all know that it's too late. But I say all that to say, an absolutely fantastic drive from Charles Leclerc. I don't know necessarily that I would give him driver of the day, if not because he made a mistake of consequence in locking up into turn 12, just as he had done, by the way, at the virtual race with young Philly and Jamie Chadwick and Dirk. So I think if you make a mistake, I'm not sure that I can give you driver that. Okay, so he was on the bad end of a dodgy strategy and poor timing from his perspective of the safety car, and cool. But nevertheless, if you're making mistakes, I've got to give that to somebody else. Let's go down the lineup and I'm going to run away. Thank you, each and every single one of you, for watching. I appreciate you, genuinely. Each and every single one of you. Ad infinitum to the moon and back, man, because trying to go to channel and do more of these and react and talk about F1, but it's chaotic. Let me just talk about Las Vegas for a second. There was a moment. So British Standard Time, the race kicked off about 6 in the morning, 2.5 hours ago. I like to watch the build up normally, but I watched just the race. I turned on 5 minutes before lights out. So I had to go back and watch retrospectively. It was Bruce Buffer's. Bruce Buffer, by the way, like mixed martial arts legend, does all the introductions. That was the guy on the mic at the start of the race introducing all the drivers. Does all the introductions for the UFC, and is a legend. Brother of Michael Buffer, boxing commentator, boxing announcer extraordinaire. Bruce has probably surpassed his brother in terms of his fame as at November of 2023. Bruce, absolute legend, and I thoroughly enjoyed. There is a viral moment though when Checo Perez just doesn't. Bruce does his big, all like full send on the Checo Perez announcement. Checo, Sergio, Checo, Perez. Gives it all the bluster. At which point, the fighters in the UFC normally, like if they're looking at Bruce, normally give him a fist bump or some form of acknowledgement. Let's go, because that's what mixed martial arts in the UFC is. And you see Checo Perez just like, Checo's just like no selling it. He's like, do one of these. He's like, what am I supposed to do now? Are you asking questions? This is an interview. Bruce Buffer is not the interview guy. He's the announcer. The Checo Perez is a brilliant moment anyway. But okay. Las Vegas, what rating am I giving that out of 10? It's an incredible race. Incredible racing. It made for incredible racing. Notwithstanding all that went before, which gladly, fortuitously, we don't need to talk about now. The bloody water valve on the manhole, the concrete. Like I'm really glad that so good was the Grand Prix and so good was the racing that all of that other stuff kind of fades to black, unless you are Carlos Sainz, who, by the way, was absolutely robbed by the FIA because they needed to. I know there was technical regs and sporting regs. I understand that now off the back of this race weekend. There is no messing around or wiggle room as far as the technical regs are concerned. If your skid block wears 1 millimeter or more, then that's an instant disqualification. There's no, extenuating circumstances, bumpy track, resurface, we'll give them a bly this time, we'll let them off. That can't happen with technical regs, and I understand that now. With sporting regs, there's some more wiggle room, right? Safety car, protocols. Do we punish Max Verstappen for the aggressive overcrowd on George Russell? There's a bit of wiggle room because these are guidelines open to interpretation by the stewards at the race at the time, in real time. However, that means then that the stewards and the FIA and the racing director have an action to take forward for next season. Because what happened to Carlos Sainz at this weekend's Grand Prix in F1 can't be allowed to happen going forward. He can't take, and you know what, my guy Peter Windsor has argued this for the longest time, right? When a different point but analogous, nevertheless, if you have a driver and in that race weekend, they have to replace a gearbox or a battery or a power unit, to give that driver a 5 or 10 place grid penalty or have them starting from the back, why are you punishing the driver for the reliability of the car? Okay, so that happens in race, right? That will always happen in race, reliability, whatever. Then obviously you've got a DNF on your hands. But in qualifying, what if Carlos Sainz puts it on pole on time, on merit, but Ferrari fail him because of a dodgy power unit or reliability issues? Why are we punishing that driver? They've done their job in qualifying. It feels like we've got like a causality mismatch, and I don't think that's. I don't rate that. I think they need to look at that, and they definitely need to look at what happened to Carlos Sainz Jr. this weekend, because that bloody manhole concrete enclosure popping up into it, that could have been super dangerous, right? Thank God it wasn't, and everybody went home safe. But what we can't allow to happen, here we go, peddlers, you guys have seen all my set is collapsing around me. But what we can't allow to happen is for a repeat of this. Again, it's happened before. George Russell 2019 Baku, Romain Grosjean back in the day. Like, it's happened before, but it seems unfair. It feels unfair to punish a driver for the track breaking up around them. That's on you, FIA. Don't allow, I don't know, listen, you can't just put up your hands and say, well, that's what the rules, well, if that's what the rules say, and that's wrong, like that feels wrong and it looks wrong and it smells wrong, then rewrite the rules, right? Amend for them in the off season. But lo and behold, we'll be back same time next year, and similar things will be happening, and it will just be bloody as you were, right? Each and every single time as you were. I need to fix this camera in this thing. Let me talk about Max and George very quickly. And again, I will read this out for the avoidance of doubt because it's really, really important, this. Overtaking a car on the inside of the corner. In order for a car being overtaken to be required to give sufficient room to an overtaking car, the overtaking car needs to have a significant portion of the car alongside the car being overtaken. So this is where it gets a bit techie with George Russell, right? Because was Max significantly alongside? And again, he's overtaking on the inside, so I think you can argue, but this is why the FIA need to establish terms and definitions. Define significantly alongside. Does that mean have a front wheel alongside their back wheel, front wheel alongside their side pod, front wheel alongside their front wheel? Like, what are we talking about? Is it front wing alongside? Like, what are we talking? Just define that at the outset, right? In the sporting regs or the rules, the rules, in the rules of conduct or the sporting regs, like just outline this. Just make it obvious for everyone, right? You've got too many new fans for whom all of this is confusing. I've been watching this sport a gazillion years, and this is confusing for me. but I digress. We go down the order very quickly. So Max Verstappen gets it done again in improbable circumstances. Circumstance mid-race where it just looked like his teammate Checo Perez was in pole position and then Max Verstappen was going to have to go some to get 25 points. But again, he just gets it done. He makes these very difficult things look easy, doesn't he? Charles Leclerc, who was a 16-1 rank outsider to win this race. Again, if his team, I suppose the big what if for Charles Leclerc, not just turn one, lap one, is if safety car hadn't come out when it had done, and if his team had been a bit more astute and put him on a two-stopper, again, could have all been very different for the Scuderia Ferrari man. Again, let me say this for the avoidance of doubt, though. Charles Leclerc, there are, as brilliant as he is, there are capacity black holes that he needs to fill if indeed he's to stand a chance of beating the very best in the business at the moment in Max Verstappen, being mistakes of consequence per turn 12, doing the right thing at the right time in defending Max Verstappen more aggressively into turn 1 and lap 1, being race strategy and the ability to manage a race in real time. Okay, so his tyre management is better as exemplified by today, but there are still things that he kind of, I don't know, he wants to do, right? He has to do if he harbours hopes of winning himself a World Drivers' Championship. But I digress. Checo Perez in third. Again, we've covered that ad infinitum. In fact, Max Verstappen and George Russell, we've covered that now. I think it was a bit harsh to penalise George Russell, who got a 5-second penalty on the back of that interaction. But again, I suppose the stewards in that sense are looking at under control, right? And 9 times out of 10, if you cause a collision ostensibly, then you're going to get a penalty. And they've adjudged George Russell to have caused that collision because he didn't even know Max was there. Just turned in on him, didn't he? Poor George Russell. Esteban Ocon overtakes his teammate. Esteban Ocon had a good time, man. Yeah, I've heard him say post-race that he didn't hear the team orders. Yeah, of course, mate. Hold station. That reminds me of back in the day with Gilles when his teammate was ordered. I think the command from Ferrari at the time was slow. That's what they put on their pit board, and Gilles interpreted that as hold station. His teammate interpreted that as, I'm going to go for the win here. Took an opportunistic one. As did Esteban Ocon. Decent drive from the young lad. Lance Stroll up there in 5th. Take that from Lance. And he's had a hard time pushing his physio the other weekend when he was having a bad time of it, getting shown the way by Fernando Alonso, even as recently as Brazil. And for once, he's beaten his teammate, right? Carlos Sainz up there in 6th. And again, that's techie. It could have been so much better for Carlos Sainz had he not been penalised with a 5. He started lower, didn't he? He was like 12th. Bloody no. A decent drive from Carlos Sainz. And Lance Stroll even, again, started from way back, didn't he? Lewis all the way down in 7th. I'm going to leave Lewis for another day, you know. Again, I think Lewis is just dying. I think a lot of the drivers at the moment, you can kind of hear it in Piastri's tone as well. You can kind of, they're just a bit tired. They're just done with this season, really. Just dying to get to the off season, have some time off, and get their pre-season fitness regime in, you know. And I can see that in Lewis. I think he's tired of having to drive around this dog of a W14. Here's looking at you, Mercedes. Between now and next year, George Russell in 8th, and again having fallen foul of a controversial 5-second penalty. Fernando Alonso in 9th and Oscar Piastri in 10th. The McLaren story is techie, right? And again, the evolution of the track has helped them between quali and the race, but their quali performance has sabotaged them for this race weekend. Both Lando and Piastri, and again, Lando crashes out. Let me have a look at your comments very quickly. Insane. Switch, Max converts another child. Oh my gosh. You know what? I was thinking about this Charles Leclerc pole to victory conversions that like the last 11 Charles Leclerc poles, Max Verstappen has beat him each and every single time. I remember Suzuka last year or the year before last was another one of those, right? But I don't think I've leveraged a lot of criticism against Charles Leclerc this Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend on the back of what was a brilliant drive. But I think here's my thing with Charles. You can hear my man in the background going crazy. He enjoyed the Grand Prix apparently as well. Here's my criticism of Charles. I think because we expect so, and people have leveled this criticism of my analysis of Lewis Hamilton, but because I think he's one of the greatest. I think Lewis Hamilton is one of the greatest drivers that I've ever seen. Right. So if we're talking about his performance in the latter stages of Abu Dhabi, notwithstanding all of the controversy born of Michael Massey's very controversial decision making, he does Singapore 18 and Silverstone 07. Like he does these things, and then that raises the level of expectation, right? Because we know that dude to be one of the greatest who've ever got behind a steering wheel. So then the expectation level is here. So then when you see Charles Leclerc make a mistake or kind of have a brain fade or lock the brakes up into the tyres up into turn 12 today, it's like, wait, hold on, Charles Leclerc. I've seen you. I know who you are, and I believe you to be one of the best young drivers that I've ever seen. So the level of expectation is here. So when the performance now is here, it's like, hold on, this expectation actuals gap needs explaining, right? I need to understand the causal of this. So therein lies my explanation. But hey, I've lost my train of thought. I'm going to go. Peddlers, clearly I need to go and get some sleep. It's all mad. It was a brilliant race day. And listen, I need to eat some humble pie in particular because I hadn't been feeling this. It all felt a bit, I don't know, it all felt a bit promotional malpractice. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills. I was a huge Alonso fan. I was a bit mad with Alonso at the start. Yes. So SHT, look, I was just about to wrap up, and you touch on another very salient point that I think all of the drivers need to be congratulated for making a brilliant race out of a very trying circumstance, a track that hadn't been running by a feeder formula. They were brand new on there, right? So it wasn't rubbered in. The temperatures maybe not freezing, not as cool as we anticipated, still very cold, which made driving, particularly in the early running on a full tank of fuel with tyres that weren't yet up to optimum temperature, notwithstanding them all trying to avoid this graining phase and damaging the first stint terminally. I think these guys are worthy of some praise. Absolutely, Outlaw, you're a legend, sir. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Yeah, I think these guys deserve a little bit more praise than probably they get. Every single one of them on the grid. Even Alonso, despite making the mistake. You wouldn't expect that from Alonso. Again, mismatch of performance and expectation. If you are that great and you make such a rudimentary mistake, then that needs some explaining, right? Fernando Alonso into turn 1, lap 1. I mean, you got to know, got to have that feel for that. I would expect Fernando Alonso, even in those trying circumstances, to have that feel and that racecraft and that savvy to avoid outbreaking himself and causing that incident, because that's ultimately what happened, right? Fernando El Plan Alonso is better than that. We saw that as recently as Sao Paulo. It's a God-tier driver, and so he shouldn't be making those mistakes. But all in all, epic Grand Prix. Cameron has to eat some humble pie because he was talking all sorts of slander about the facade. 99% show, 1% Grand Prix and racing. Even Max Verstappen kind of walked that back, didn't he? Singing Viva Las Vegas on his victory lap going back into the pits. He was embracing it. And I think, finally, not to, again, do this Max Verstappen loving thing, finally, the fact that Max was won over by what was an incredible race, by having to fight his way through the pack. It wasn't just one of those ones. This wasn't like a walk-off victory. You had to fight through it, right? And you had to overtake and come through the pack and counter some adversity. And I think that speaks to who Max Verstappen is as a driver. I'm not saying that he doesn't want to win, and I'm not saying that he doesn't have the capacity to spit out his dummy sometimes when things don't go his way. But this dude really, really loves racing, like loves racing properly and enjoys, even where he's talked so negatively about the Las Vegas Grand Prix in the lead up and the pre-race and FP1 craziness and whatever. When you get a race like that, a Max Verstappen, and even myself as a fan, to be fair, diehards and greybeards alike, all of that other stuff kind of just fades to black because you've seen a great race deliver on the racing. Per James Vowles, the legend, he said, don't judge us on what happened at FP1, judge us on what happens on Saturday, on Sunday even in the race. Fair play, James. Fair play, you've nailed it, sir. And I will leave you guys on that. Listen, I hope you enjoyed that race. Not the race weekend, but that race in particular was levels. One of the best races this season, for sure, unequivocally. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the overtaking. I hope you enjoyed Max's comeback. I hope you enjoyed Charles Leclerc's overtake on Checo Perez and Checo Perez's performance and all of the 20 drivers' performance in, again, what wasn't ideal conditions, given the temperatures, given the risk of graining of the tyres, given the late nights that the teams were spending up and the struggling to travel back to back. And by the way, they're going to Abu Dhabi next race, which is techie, right? They're going to be tired. But anyway, listen, thank you guys so much for joining. Smash the like on your way out the door. Subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already. You guys have been legends. Grateful to each and every single one of you ad infinitum. Thank you so much for watching. Between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare. Peace.